This is one of my Pentium III chips. Like most of my other stuff, this one was a purchase of a platform selling second-hand items. It is not surprising that many computer components that are over 20 years old have the best time behind them. There is no exception to this Pentium III. With a scratched surface on the die and a big part broken off one corner, this chip won't win any beauty or performance contests. And the fact that it doesn't work may also be a slight problem. With this CPU installed in the motherboard, my diagnostics card does not show any postcodes, as if no CPU is installed at all. Whatever the reason was for this large piece of the die to break off, it may have caused internal cracks in the silicon, and we may have lost the integrity of the chip. Another possibility could be that we may have lost parts of the circuitry that extended into the missing piece of the die. But I don't want to give up hope just yet. I do have another chip that is fairly beaten up. This Duron chip from AMD has also seen better days. But this one does work, which is surprising because under the microscope it almost looks like that parts of the chip are exposed. I don't know what that is and I'm not claiming to be an expert, but it does look like a piece of copper sticks out from the silicon chip. The damage on the Intel chip is limited to this one corner, but it does look much worse than the damage all around the AMD chip. If the die and the chip of the Pentium III are indeed still intact, then the issue must be somewhere else. I looked around the surface of the substrate to see if I can spot something obvious. And indeed, I did find something. Let's have a look at it under the microscope. Here is a scratch above a few of the copper traces that lead from the die to the pins. Maybe this scratch damaged some of the traces. This does look like a deep scratch, and I can definitely see parts of the exposed copper traces. So we need to figure out if those traces are still healthy and connected. I don't know about you, but I have no experience working on something that delicate. Maybe now it's a good time to say this as well. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. But since the CPU is already dead, I'm just curious if I can figure out what's wrong with it and experiment with ideas. If you continue watching and have a better idea of solving such an issue that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, let me know in the comments. Okay, here is my idea. What you see here is the tip of an ordinary needle. I will use it to scratch off the surface above the copper traces and see if we can actually see cracked or cut traces beneath. It is quite astonishing how big the tip of the needle is compared to the copper traces, and you need a lot of patience and a steady hand. The traces below the scratch become immediately visible. I guess the deep scratch damaged the top of the surface badly and made it quite brittle. Large parts of the surface can be scooped away easily and expose more copper. And even though I tried to be super careful and did not apply a lot of pressure, you can see a few copper flakes here and there. Once I was done with the main scratch, I removed adjacent surface material to expose more of the copper traces for better visibility. I am looking for an obvious crack that may help identify a problem and potentially a fix for the CPU. By the way, I do have two other Pentium III CPUs with the same model number, so if this one doesn't make it, we are still fine. I have removed now enough of the surrounding area and I am ready to inspect the traces carefully. To my surprise, the traces look like they are not damaged. Yes, they do look bent from the pressure that was applied by the scratch, but now I am more convinced that the broken die may be the reason this chip doesn't work. Let's look around the surface and see if there's something else. This one looks like it could be an issue, but I have low hopes that this has the broken trace below. Nevertheless, I want to be certain and therefore, let's scratch off some more surface. After cleaning it with alcohol, I think we can agree that this trace looks fine. There were no other obvious issues on the substrate. So now we have 6 traces exposed, and I still have hopes that one of those traces may have a microfracture that prevents the CPU from working. But how could a possible fix look like? I don't think a soldering iron will do any good here. The area is just way too small. So I decided to apply some solder paste with a needle that I used to scratch off the surface. If you look closely, you can actually see tiny solder balls and the flux the solder paste is made of. It's amazing to see this detail through the microscope. I have to admit that the camera quality isn't the best, and the details I can see through the optical eyepieces are much better. But I'm still happy that you can see the level of detail what is on your screen right now. And again, you need a lot of patience and a steady hand to move those tiny solder balls around. We need to cover as much of the copper trace as possible. Hopefully the solder will attach to the copper traces and seal any fractures, in case there are any. Maybe I'm kidding myself, but I do feel like aligning those solder balls will actually make a huge difference. And one thing is certain, a microscope will give you superpowers and enable you to do things you cannot do without one. Now I just need to do the same thing with a single trace on the other side, to be consistent. And we're done. But before we start with the hot air, I want to protect the die with Kapton tape just in case. If you like this video so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss whenever I upload a new video. Here you can see the line where the original scratch was. Looks like I have covered the traces with solder everywhere across that line. So if there was an issue, I hope it's gone now. But I keep my hopes low because I couldn't really identify any broken traces before. Now there is only one more thing to do. Install the CPU and test it. And here's the moment of truth. Bummer. Nothing. I guess that's it. This chip may be dead for good. So, this chip will become my practice chip for removing, replacing and reattaching pins. That is something I want to learn as well and figure out a nice technique. Even though I couldn't bring this chip back to life, I think I learned a lot working on this chip and at that microscale. I know now that it is possible to scratch off the surface of those chips without damaging the traces. The secret is to be very gentle and patient. One wrong move and you may create plenty of extra work for yourself. Let me know if you have any other ideas that I could try to maybe revive this chip. Or do you believe as well that this chip is dead for good? Would you have done something different, or do you have any suggestion what I could have done better? Let me know in the comments, which I'm looking forward to read. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in one of my other videos.